Now let's talk about the publishing process itself, and there are three different ways to distribute your applications. First, you can distribute them directly to your customers. This is often called ad hoc distribution or side loading, and Android supports this type of distribution without any restrictions. Apple and Microsoft, however, only allow this distribution style for testing, and they limit the number of devices you can deploy to with this approach. You can also distribute your applications through a publishing store, and this is typically what you think of when you say you're going to publish your mobile application. This is of course the most common approach and provides for both commercialization as well as really broad visibility since it's marketed by the vendors themselves. And finally, you can distribute through an enterprise model. This is designed for internal use apps within a corporate structure. So for example, a computer manufacturer might build an app to manage their warehouse inventory and distribute it on their own internet to their own employees. Now for Android, this is the same as ad hoc, because Google doesn't have any restrictions. There's no limitations on private distribution. So you essentially just self-sign your app and distribute it via website or directly to the devices. Apple and Microsoft, however, use this as their supported mechanism for distribution outside of their public stores. So both require that you obtain an enterprise certificate from their publishing portals, and both of them require you jump through, well, there's a few hoops, there's a few things you need to go through to get an enterprise license. Now, Apple in particular, they're very reluctant to give these out because it lets you bypass their store, and therefore it cuts down on their profits and it really reduces the use of the App Store. Now, the store model is the one that most apps will use, and each vendor has their own branded store that you can publish your app to. And the vendor will market the app, they'll provide access to it from compatible devices, and they host the binary, they host any marketing materials, information that you supply, and this allows users to find your application, maybe by keywords or by category. Now, in terms of app stores, Google and Android are by far the most open. There are over 100 different app stores for Android, and these stores vary. Some focus on specific geographic locations, some even focus on specific app types or app categories. And if you support Android, then you'll probably want to consider distributing your apps to multiple stores. Usually we start with Google Play, it's the most popular. Amazon is second, but you want to look at other stores like GetJar, CNET, and Get5. And then again, even digging deeper if you're localizing your application. Now for Apple and Microsoft, each have a single app, and it's one-stop shopping. It's the only place to buy applications legally. Now, before you publish to any public store, make sure you read through the publishing agreement. This tells you the rules they expect you to follow, as well as any content guidelines for what's considered acceptable. Now, each store has a different set of requirements, and some are more strict than others, but generally speaking, you want to avoid anything illegal. Hopefully that's obvious, but it is frowned upon in the app stores. You want to avoid using internal or undocumented APIs. Most of the vendors really frown upon that. Make sure your content matches age restrictions. This is especially important for games and entertainment. You want to avoid any pictures or depictions of real violence. And if you enable hidden features after the testing process, that could be grounds for having your app removed from the App Store. Now, looking at published content on the app stores, Google and Apple are very close. Both have over 1.5 million apps in their store, and this is based on marketing data from mid-2015, so expect these numbers to be higher now. And you can see the other app stores, they've got considerably less applications. Now, this gives you some idea of popularity. You see Windows is behind in the number of apps. However, this can also be interpreted as an opportunity for new developers. It's a good place to get a foothold in the market, and it could mean less competition within certain app categories. Now, Google, Apple, and Microsoft all require you to register as a developer before you can submit apps to their app store, and each one has a registration fee. Now, take a look at the numbers on screen. These are in US dollars, and if we look at the iOS App Store, it's $99 for a regular developer or $299 for an enterprise developer. And these are annual fees. These are recurring fees that have to be paid every year. Google, in comparison, has a $25 one-time fee, and then you're a member for life. And it's the same story for Microsoft with the Windows Store. It's $19 to join as an individual or $99 to join as a company, as a corporation. And there's some other interesting numbers here as well. Both the iOS App Store and the Google Play Store have no limits on the number of apps you can publish. For Windows, you're limited to 100 free applications, but there's no limits on paid applications. And you can see the market share numbers here as well. Although Google Play has a much larger share than iOS, there's actually more money, typically more revenue generated on the iOS App Store. Windows is a bit smaller, and they have a smaller market share, but again, could be seen as an opportunity. Now, when it comes to enticing your users, you want to grab them early and get them to download your applications, get them to try it. And so that means things like your icons and your screenshots, all your marketing metadata on the store, very important. So make sure it looks great, of course. Now, every store has that publishing data you can include with your binaries. You need to describe your application. You can do things like provide videos, show your application in action. This is actually required now by Apple for iOS 8 and newer. You need screenshots. You want to show off your application, show off those key features, show off those great screens, show off your amazing UI. Of course, come up with a catchy name, something that describes your application, and a detailed description of your features. Make sure that description matches your application. If it doesn't, it's possible you will not meet the requirements of the App Store and you won't be published. And of course, you want to include SEO keywords. This is used for the search engines so people can find your application. And don't underestimate these steps. The icon, the screenshots, the first things your potential buyers will see. Make them compelling. You want your users to, at minimum, be interested, if not outright impressed at your quality. Right? So spend some time. Think about how to best show off your app. Know your audience. Know the category. Know the market that you're trying to appeal to. And, tailor your app, tailor your description, and tailor your screenshots to those users. Now, once you submit your app to be published on the App Store, it's going to go through a review process. And this process is not instant. It can take, between 2 and 10 days. And that actually depends on, of course, the App Store, but also the time of year. And for example, holidays can be a little bit slower. Now, Apple tends to be a little bit pickier than Microsoft and Google, and their rules have changed over time, and they've even sometimes been subject to the reviewer interpretation, meaning, a second application you might pass on something that was flagged by a previous reviewer. Microsoft tends to be a little bit more lenient, but they've been very picky about things like localization. So if you start the localization process, you add a second language, you need to localize the screenshots and make sure your descriptions are completely localized along with all of the features. So Microsoft's really going for completeness in that respect. Now, once your app is reviewed, you'll get an email indicating if it's been published and available or that it was rejected, and they'll give you really good descriptions, really good reasons as to why your app didn't pass. And if it's rejected, there's no penalty, so don't fear this step. Take the feedback, change your application, perhaps make a fix, and resubmit the application. And I've heard stories of people submitting 5, 6, 7 times. There's no penalty. You don't get blacklisted. So just go ahead, make the changes, and off you go. Now, part of publishing your application is determining a revenue strategy. Now, not all applications are designed to make money. Sometimes you just want to share something with the world. Sometimes it's part of a broader publishing or branding strategy. And some applications are just designed to make money. But make sure that you have realistic expectations. A lot of applications barely break even these days from development costs. Again, people are expecting great applications. It takes time to develop. And even really popular apps will eventually stop making as much money. They'll fall off the charts, and that revenue will slow or even stop. Now, statistics say that, roughly speaking, you want to be in the top 250 to 500 apps to be making much money. And remember how many apps are on the App Store. This is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So publishing an app does not mean an instant path to riches, but doesn't mean it can't be part of your successful business strategy. But keep this in mind when you're pricing your application. Think about your competition. Do you have something unique? Do you have a corner of the market that only you own? Well, that might give you room to sell your application for more. But if you're competing against other similar applications, you want to make sure that you're priced reasonably. Now, another option for generating revenue is to provide advertisements within your application. And all of the app stores support ad revenue, and it's generally fairly easy to bring this into your application. And this makes a lot of sense for free applications. It's a great way to generate a little bit of revenue, and as your app gets more popular, then more revenue may come in. There's a lot of ad frameworks out there. Each vendor has their own. There's a lot of third party, and many of these are cross-platform. So actually, as an example, you can integrate Google's AdMob into iOS using a Xamarin component. As well, another popular option is to use in-app purchases. This can be a really effective strategy if you have a free app with advertisements. You can use this to remove the ads or add additional app features. It's really great in games. You could use it to add additional levels or provide help to pass a difficult level or add extra items. And some apps will also use this to transition from a free or reduced price version to a full version of your application, almost like that old shareware model. You want to be a little bit careful though. You don't want people to feel like they're being asked constantly for money. So if you ask them to pay for a low price version and then you're constantly upselling, this could actually generate bad reviews. But if done well, can be a really popular and really successful revenue strategy.